Hello, everyone. Once again, Brother Al McClaney with this week's stewardship video. Before we go too far into the video, let me go ahead and read the disclaimer. No advice should be seen as a recommendation, as I am not a licensed financial advisor and is for educational purposes only. Because this week, there are definitely several stocks and ETFs that will be featured in this video. I want to start off this video with the reason or the inspiration behind it. At St. John Baptist Church, we do a men's Bible study called the Brotherhood on Tuesdays. And this week, Deacon Oliver Thompson was leading the Bible study, and we were in James chapter 5, and you'll see that scripture come up. And it was talking about the use of your riches and how they're acquired, and making sure that you put them to good use and have God as the center on the principles you're using regarding wealth. And so that led me to think about a very well-known saying that the end justifies, or the end justifies the means, or the means justifies the end, which is not really biblical, meaning that any type of means necessary to justify the end. Well, that's not always the case. And we'll see biblically, God is interested in how we acquire wealth and what we do with that wealth. And I thought about recently Deacon Rodney Johnson, who works in the small business arena when it comes to consulting small business. He is an expert when it comes to the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP. And I remember early on last year when this legislation was coming out, he was making sure that businesses and organizations and nonprofits, he was emphasizing, make sure you keep good records, because there are going to be some who don't use the funds for its intended purposes, therefore committing fraud possibly. And it didn't take long for the headlines to start. And you can see in this slide the breaking news headlines. Some of the ones: feds charge defendants with fraud, money laundering, and illegal PPP, which is Paycheck Protection Program. Feds ramp up probe into PPP fraud, charge 57 people with trying to steal $17 million. 341 million in PP fraud so far and counting. And I thought about the scripture that we were studying this past Tuesday. And this past Tuesday, the scripture was James 5, 1-6. And I said, from a biblical standpoint, the end does not justify the means in all cases. And God is interested in how we acquire wealth and what we do with that wealth. So the Message Bible in James 5, verses 1-6 says, "And a final word to you, arrogant rich, take some lessons and lament. You'll need buckets for the tears when the crash comes upon you. Your money is corrupt and your fine clothes stink. Your greedy luxuries are a cancer in your gut, destroying your life from within. You thought you were piling up wealth, but what you've piled up is judgment. All the workers you've exploited and cheated cry out for judgment. The groans of the workers you used and abused are a roar in the ears of the master avenger. You've looted the earth and lived it up, but all you'll have to show for it is a fatter than usual corpse. In fact, what you've done is condemn and murder perfectly good persons who stand there and take it." So what I thought about is those who committed fraud, they were using funds that businesses that rightly needed it may not have been able to even get to those funds, because possibly they had run out, and the number of funds that went to undeserving businesses who committed fraud. Or the way we treat others in our business affairs, God is definitely interested in it. And you may look at the scripture and say, well, Brother Al, he's talking about rich people. And if you look at the statistics from the World Bank, the average person in the world, the wages are around $10,000 annually. That's the world. We often think in United States terms that we're not rich. But remember, we have a universal God. And so when we're looking at the rich people, we are the rich in the US, most likely. So he's talking in this scripture to all of us. And here you've got a caption about greed. And here's Proverbs 119, because a lot of times the fraud and the misuse of the funds or exploiting others when it comes to their business practices is often generated by our heart, in which rests possibly greed. So Proverbs 1 and 19 says, "So are the ways of everyone who is greedy for gain. Greed takes away the lives of its possessors." And you can see here someone just greedily stuffing their mouth with money. And then you can barely see this little person here, little guy, maybe a small business, maybe someone who's not uh, high in the economic class or disenfranchised group, such as African Americans, or in some cases Hispanics, or some cases women. They have their little portion and not even receiving the huge amount of resources possibly available. And then over here we see someone cheating off another's plate. So the Lord specifically wants us to have godly gains in all of our lives, and including our wealth. So what are the instructions he gives us? 1 Timothy 6, verses 17 through 18 in the New Living Translation. Teach those who are rich, and we've established that we're all rich by the world standards in the US. So teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. Their trust should be in God, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment. Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. So here's our instruction there. I mean, how do we avoid the James 5 arrogant rich? By submitting ourselves to the Lord, trusting in the Lord, realizing we don't trust in our riches, and to do good. And how do we do good? We follow God's principles when it comes to being stewards of our money and generous with others. 1 Thessalonians 5:22 in the Amplified Bible says, "Abstain from every form of evil, withdraw and keep away from it." So in this, we're seeing that just the appearance of evil we should be avoiding. The appearance of deceit and fraud, we should be going the extra mile as Christians to avoid that. And we've put up in previous videos those principles when it comes to money management. If we're following God's biblical principles when it comes to our finances, we're going to be able to carry out 1 Timothy 6, verses 17 and 18, counter to the James 5 Christians or believers who the Lord called up as being arrogant. We should be abstaining from every form of evil, as 1 Thessalonians 5:22 says. So I often get comments that, "Hey, Al, I can't wait for your video. The section that talks about the stocks and the potential investments." That's why I I I caution, don't make, don't fast forward, because as we've said before, there's a balance. We need to be good stewards, which are the principles that are often taught in the first part of the video. And then the second part, be wise with the investments. So if we're one with the outer of the other, and you're blessed by the Lord in that your investments are doing well, but you're not following his principles and guidance, we could be that arrogant rich person, or the person who now starts to trust the blessing versus the blesser, which is the Lord. So as always, we transition over. So keep that in mind when we're talking about the market and we're talking about potential investments. And as I always say, no advice should be seen as a recommendation. But this week's earnings release, a couple of them are interesting. One in particular that I'll be looking at just to see how it responds to earnings is GameStop. And just to put a backdrop for GameStop, and I've cautioned people about investing because there's volatility, and here's a demonstration of it. So for the last 50 days, GameStop has moved 142% down. So it's dropped 142%. So right now, as I'm doing this video, it closed on Friday at a price of $200.27. That's off of a high 50 days ago of $347.51. So that's a 142% drop. Prior to that, when it was making its parabolic run, so in 15 days, and I'm taking it from the time when it really started moving, it took 15 days to go from $8.75 to that high of $347.51. That was a 1,758% increase. So I'm going to be curious just to watch. I don't have any trades on in GameStop. I'm just going to watch what happens when the earnings are announced. Here it's got it at the close of business on Tuesday, and you can see my cursors pointing to GameStop. So that'd be interesting. There may be some others here that you are looking at. Remember, do your research. So let's take a look at a couple of potential investments you may want to explore. Do your own research, talk to any financial advisors that you may have. So I've been talking about oil. And as I was coming on, there was to do the video on one of the news stations is reporting for the second straight week, I think it was over 1 million travelers. As we talked before, the economy is opening up. So of course that's going to affect jet fuel demand. So oil could be a good play or investment to look at. And I've pointed out before Murphy Oil, the stock symbol is MUR. It's also in the space of commodities, and commodities, as the economy opens up, there is showing some spikes going on in commodities. So oil is a commodity, Murphy Oil. And you can see the chart here. Recently, there was a pullback, so maybe there's an opportunity to buy some on this pullback. Another to look at is agricultural commodities. So most of the time, the most common way people invest in commodities, agricultural commodities, are through what they call futures. Some of you seen the movie Trading Places. That's what they were doing. They were operating in futures. They talked about the orange juice, orange futures market. Well, there's a ability through an exchange traded fund to operate in the futures without owning futures, because that in some cases there's more education needed to successfully trade in futures. But here's an agricultural commodity ETF, exchange traded fund, in soybeans, and it's SOYB. And you can see it's it's moderately priced. You can see it's had a nice trend for the last, year to 9 months. There was a pullback, so maybe there's an opportunity. We talked about this before, this 21-day moving average line. Some people like that, if it goes below it, to monitor, and if it goes back above it, maybe that's a opportunity to buy. So that's SOYB. That's giving you a soybean investment. Here's another one, corn. Also, look at the chart. Nice pattern in the last 9 to 12 months. It also is going below its 21. Maybe you're looking at, hey, this is an opportunity, because both of these closed on Friday up, to get it into corn. If you want to read about what these are, you can go, we've pointed out before, this website, etfdb.com. You can use that to go and basically crack open an ETF and see what companies you're invested in. But what you'll find here, when you go to ETFDB and put in coin or SOYB, soybean, you'll find that there's no companies that they own. But read the description and it'll talk about these are exchange traded funds that are investing in futures. So you can take a look, but it doesn't necessarily have the volatility of if you were actually in the futures contract. The last one in the commodities arena is copper, and I've been talking about copper um, previously. Nice pattern again, nice upward trend, still continuing to go. But this is not actual copper, but this is a company, Freeport Moran, and a lot of traders who don't trade the copper's future, they use this as what they call a proxy. So it's like a substitute. And the symbol is FCX, and that's Freeport Moran. I want to introduce you to a resource. Some people have asked me, how do I look if a stock is a good stock? Well, of course, you need to have your own set of criteria, but one you may use as a free resource. There's a guy named Louis Navalier. He has a huge mutual funds, and he also provides consultations to a lot of institutional investors. So other mutual funds on top of the mutual fund that he actually runs. And he has a free resource called Portfolio Grader. And he says that the investment newsletter that he has that you pay for, he uses Portfolio Grader to come up with his stock selections. So you can go to Portfolio Grader, and here's the website here. You can actually sign up for it, and it's free. There is a pay component that if you want to go into get his newsletters, and they're actually pretty reasonably priced, you can do that. But if you don't want to do that, you can sign up and you can use this Portfolio Grader. You can actually use it without signing up. But if you sign up, you can also get an additional stock report. So here's the front page of his Portfolio Grader. And you type in, and I use FCX in this case, the symbol FCX, which was Freeport Moran we just showed, and it'll pull up one other screen before I get to this one, but I just want to go to the end one where you can get the stock report. But it'll show you a screen that will give you kind of a summary that'll give you the grade. It'll talk if this is a volatile stock, and then it'll have a little button that's kind of multicolored, like where I'm putting my cursor, that says stock report. The only way you can get that stock report is actually sign up for an account. As I said, that's free. So if you click on that button, you'll get a grading of it. And you could hover over these different, and these are screenshots, so this is not an active site where I can blow it up, but hopefully you can see this. You can hover over these different fundamental grades, and it'll tell you, what that is. And the overall grade for Freeport Moran was A. Now, this is just one type of methodology, and he uses mostly what we call fundamentals. And you can go and read about, what's his methodology, how does he come up with the grading, and if you're comfortable with it, this may be a resource you can use just to kind of give you an idea, another resource of what is considered, you may consider, yeah, this is a good solid stock that I want to invest in. Now, this particular resource, it's not designed for trading. It's more for investing, which tends to be a longer term hold of that investment. But again, it's free, and you may want to use it. And if it works, maybe this is one of the sources that you use to make your decisions on stock. As we always do, we end with looking at the overall market. We saw that Standard & Poor ran into some selling toward the latter part of the week, but this could be just the fact that it's taken a rest because it had a nice little run the last couple of days. And it'll be interesting to see what happens, because there's that 21-day we've talked about before. Will it bounce off of that? Or if it goes through, it could go down further to this point, which could act as, I've drawn that line as support. And if we carry that line through, it'd probably be like about right there. So first place that we look to hopefully that it would bounce would be that 21 day. And I haven't talked a lot about these at the bottom. These are volume bars. And you can see, of course, the higher the bar, the more of that activity. So if it's in red, that means there were more selling volume. If it's in green, there was more buying volume. Let's look at QQQ. QQQ is not as clean, and we've seen that in technology as the Standard & Poor 500. And as always remember, some of these tech companies are also in that S&P 500, but this is tech heavy specific, and we can see this is a bar I had drawn, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, and it seems to be respecting it. So it's not perfect, but you can see where it hit that bar, and it probably, like I said, it wasn't perfect. It probably bounced off of that support. So we'll see if it maintains it. It has definitely crossed this 21 day. We talked about that before. So some people's trading plan or methodology may be they're not going to do anything until they see it go above the 21. Some may say, okay, here's a line. It hasn't broken that line. If it shows that it's going to go above it, some people may say, hey, this is a buying opportunity. But we did see on Friday, it did end with a slight uptick, and we could look at the volume and see there was more buying than selling. And if I remember the way it closed on Friday, I think that was like after lunch, because up until that point, I think it was a lot of selling. Then it kind of turned around after lunch. So when it end this week, with by the time you see this, my anniversary probably would have passed. But as I'm doing the video, this is Saturday, March 20th, which is 17 years ago. On March 20th, 2004, I was married to my lovely wife, Janine McClaney. You can see her there. She hasn't changed. I look like I've aged. Hopefully I've lost a little weight. I look bigger there. But that's us. It's happy 17th anniversary to my wife, Janine. And also pointing out, here was a picture with the mothers. My mother is going on to be with the Lord. But to the left, you see on the picture, which would be Janine's right, you see her mother, Wilma Robinson. And she celebrated her birthday this week. Her birthday is always the day after St. Patrick's Day. So happy birthday to her. So again, happy anniversary to my lovely wife. We will be going out. We got our second dose last week. So we're going to venture out to a restaurant for the first time in over a year. We've had carry out, but we haven't sat down. So we'll be still masked up. We've had our second dose. We're still not at full efficacy, but we figure we're gonna try it today on our anniversary. So as always, if you want to email me, it's a_McClaney@yahoo.com. You can find these videos out on YouTube. You can do a search under my name, Al McClaney, and you can actually subscribe and set up an alert so that whenever I post a video, which is usually around noon-ish on every Saturday, you could get an alert to see the video out there. And in that case, you could probably do respond to it in some way on Monday morning regarding the market. So as my pastor, Denny Dwight Davis always says, or Dr. Denny Dwight Davis always said, at St. John Baptist Church, Grand Prairie, Texas, remembering to keep a good spirit. And as I always say on the videos, remember that Jesus is Lord and God is therefore the owner, but we are his faithful stewards. And we do that by following his biblical principles.